Rancid's self-titled debut album, came out 30 years ago tomorrow. 30 years ago on May 10th. So, however, whatever way you want to slice it, we are at the 30th anniversary of Rancid having a full scale LP released out into the wild. And let's face it, music and punk rock have never been the same since this went down. Say what you want about this album, and maybe I'll have some words to say about it at the back end of this stream. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll keep it to myself. There is no doubt about it, though. This album is super important in the history of rock music, punk rock, and especially Rancid. But on today's stream, we're not really going to break down this album. We're not going to break it down at all, actually. Maybe a little bit here and there at the end. What we're going to do, what we're here and we're focused on, is the in-between period. How did we get from here? How did we get there? From the Operation Ivy days. And we're going to explore all of that. We're going to do what every great, really interesting stream does. We're going to read some books. We are going to check some quotes. And we're going to watch lots and lots of clips. So buckle up. This is going to be a fun ride. And just a note, guys, those of you who are watching live, if I still have some steam at the end of this, maybe we'll kind of take a journey around the web, do whatever. But we'll see. This will probably be a pretty long one. So we'll do what we can. We'll figure it out from there. I'm just glad you're joining me for this stream because this is one I've been wanting to do for a while, and one that, quite frankly, was very fun to research. It was so fun to research all of this stuff. And I knew most of this stuff, but to actually kind of get it formalized and get a structure going, that is to me half the fun of doing any of these streams. So I hope you enjoyed the song I played at the top for those of you who are on. Journey to the End of the East Bay. And that's going to kind of be our overarching theme, right? Journey to the End of the East Bay is partially the story of Operation Ivy turning to Rancid. It's actually more of the downfall of Operation Ivy. And though the rising up of a new band, but there's some other stuff in there about the Matty, which is not Matt Freeman. Some guy from New Orleans. But on today's stream, we're going to have two main characters. Those two main characters are going to be Matt Freeman and Tim Armstrong. Because really what we're telling today and what we're talking about, as I put in the thumbnail, story of friendship. It's a story of the power of friendship. Friendship and punk rock. How it all came together to create one of the most iconic bands of all time. Out of the ashes of one of the most iconic bands of all time. Thank you so much, Matthew. Love the praise and the props. Got to feed that ego, man. But I mean that sincerely. I have so much fun with this. When I realized that, like, what do I do with this channel? Am I going to be like a long form essayist? I kind of want to do that. I actually do. But really my ultimate aim and goal is probably this is a show. This is kind of like a podcast, and have a little fun with that. All right. So let's see how my slideshow works tonight, because I want to talk about that friendship that I was referencing earlier between Matt Freeman and Tim Armstrong. That is a slide that'll be on there later. I got to go backwards. See, I just get a compliment on the show and then I don't know what I'm doing. There's a preview of all the stuff we're going to pull out. So, let's not listen to, but in the background, I want to have something on. I want to have on in the background some basic radio. Now, who was Basic Radio, you ask? Well, it was kind of primordial Operation Ivy. Op Ivy before Op Ivy. The teenage band of many of your favorites, including, as you can see, maybe right there on my screen, Tim Armstrong. Very, very young Tim Armstrong. Baby-faced Tim Armstrong. And of course, in this time period, and ever since he's a little kid, he is good friends with the great legendary bass player Matt Freeman. These two have been thick as thieves since they were literally little kids. And that's where our story takes us. Now, here's an article that we're going to be referencing quite a bit, written by Larry Livermore, the godfather of the Gilman Street scene in some ways. Him and Tim Yohannan. And here's what he had to say back in 2001, and this is reprinted on his website. And if you go down in the description, all the sources I'm using on today's show will be, or excuse me, are included in the description. So if you want to reference anything, if you want to check me, if you have something to add to it, let me know in the comments, but also go to the description and check out any of the sources for yourself. Here's what Livermore, though, had to say about the friendship between Matt and Tim. He said, except for a brief interruption in the early 90s, they've been playing together ever since. And even on those rare occasions when they weren't making music, they remained the best of friends. You get the impression that even if their musical partnership hadn't proved so successful, they'd still be inseparable. They need to belong, to be part of something. It's a recurring theme with both of them. It absolutely is a recurring theme of both of them. They need to belong. They also need each other. These two guys, Matt and Tim, they are, I think understandably, two different types of personality. Tim is this real spiritual guy, this deep guy, kind of intellectual. Then you have Matt, who seems to be the getter done guy of the band. He's got to handle the business. He was the sober one early on. He was the caretaker. And it's within that relationship that they're able to form this bond and be so super successful. Now, I'm not going to tell you the story of Operation Ivy. There's plenty of places that have told you that story before. So you can go ahead and do your own research on that. But we all know they hook up with Dave Mallow, Jess Michaels, and the rest, as they say, is history. Operation Ivy, I don't think this is hyperbole, but they're like the most important band in punk history, or at least one of them. Are they more important than Green Day? Maybe not. Are they more important than the Ramones? Probably not. But does all that big boom that happened in the 90s that like Green Day was a part of, that Bad Religion was a part of, that quite frankly Rancid and NoFX and Lagwagon and No Use for a Name and Propaganda and all them, would any of that have happened if you wouldn't have had the greatness of Operation Ivy? I don't know. Remains to be seen. I don't want to live in a world where that possibility, though, doesn't exist. Now, let's actually move on. Let's move our footage, being that we were watching a little basic radio. Let's have a little Operation Ivy on the background, and we'll play some actual songs in a minute, and it won't just be me talking and talking and talking and talking. I think it's interesting to note, though, how frustrated the members of Operation Ivy always seemed to be. Their run is super short. Yet as short as it is, it seems to be relatively drama filled, and there's a lot of twists and turns. I think we all know by now they're an early adopter of the Gilman Street scene. They are taken to early on in the Gilman universe, and they're basically the house band. They are East Bay punk in this initial era. And they find a lot of success, even if they get insulted as being like ska boys, because what they were doing, as we all know, wasn't pure punk rock. It was an amalgamation of ska and punk. Now, they didn't really create that, but I think they softened that and packaged it very uniquely for an American audience. We would see later in the late 90s how influential they would actually be when everyone was doing ska stuff and everyone was putting ska songs on their records. And there was a wave. It died, but it kind of came back, and then it died again. That is their clear influence, but it wasn't always so easy. They did record their Hectic EP, and that got them quite a bit of buzz, that Hectic EP. And maybe even more so than giving them buzz, it gave them something to do. It gave them product to sell, to traffic. You had something to take on the road with you. And Operation Ivy is, by all accounts, the first real Gilman Street band that went on the road. But don't take my word for it. Let's hear it straight from the sources. And so I can stop talking for a second.
We had already toured a quote.
And just as a note, and I'll reference it when I reference it, but these clips and many of the clips are from Turn It Around, the story of East Bay Punk, which just so happens to very recently been released to YouTube free with ads. I got a copy on Amazon. I like to pay that sweet Bezos money. I got my copy, but if you don't want to do that or if you can't afford it, I know you got YouTube. That's how you're watching this. Go ahead and check it out on YouTube. It's one of the better documents we have, and a fairly modern document documenting. I said that word a lot of times. This time period. All right, enough of me talking. Let's hear about the Operation Ivy tour. Let's unpause poor Kevin Seconds there.
A few times, and everyone asked us about Operation Ivy. Like every single person was like, "Have you guys played with Operation Ivy?" And we're like, "Yeah." Like, oh my God! Tell them to please come out. Come to New Jersey. Come to here. Come here.
There had been East Bay bands that toured before, but Operation Ivy was the first Gilman Street band to tour. You know, and it was booked by Kamala.
Op Ivy was the first band that toured that we knew in our circle of. It wasn't even a thought that you had, like, I'm going to be in a band and then we're going to go on tour. It's like, oh, wow, other people are going to get to see Op Ivy. That's neat.
And we were able to fit, like, the amps in the trunk and then my drums in this box. And then David Hayes came with us, so there was 5 of us in this Newport with all our equipment.
And they were touring in a car with a wooden box on the top of their car. Like just with their gear in a box. And we were just like, you are fucking crazy. You people are nuts. We played a show. It was Fugazi, Verbal Assault, Operation Ivy.
I just kind of like went with whatever. Like touring a car, sure. You know, play in a barn with sheep, yeah, why not? Like everything just, yeah. The answer is yes.
You know, tour toughens you up and you get out there and it's not Gilman Street. You know, it could be some fucked up club the kid's putting a show on in, or most likely, you know, some Betts Hall or this, you know, you gotta deal with all the other, you know, all the bullshit that comes with a punk show in the 80s.
After
Archivist, I was making the greatest points ever right there. I was having the greatest takes. My apologies. What I meant to say in a very wordy way, and I'll say it much shorter now, is that it's not necessarily mentioned here, but that tour, it was rough, like it's mentioned here, but I mean, it was like really rough. They're in a car. I believe they're like in Matt's car, you know, stuffed in like sardines with their equipment, with the road equipment, having to lug everything around, getting rained on, playing in dudes' living rooms for like 3 people, no one knowing who they are. And then there's other spots where I was archivist. There's other spots where people know every word. The hectic EP has gotten to them. Either way, they are becoming a force, but kind of a big force. This is a different level than what a Gilman Street crew of guys that were just teenagers a couple of years ago were really ready for at this point.
that tour, there was something about that tour that just like we came back ready to record a whole-length album, and we did. And at that time, that's when we started, you know, we'd play a show and it would be sold out.
So I showed you that just to make the point of how crucial that tour was, as Dave Mello says right there at the end. They were able to grow their product, grow their band. Now, as the legend would have it, it was actually Larry Livermore who proposed them do another EP and not a full-length album. Well, turns out that's not what the band wanted. The band was a little bit more ambitious than that, and they thought they were ready for a full-length album. Livermore didn't necessarily think so, and on top of that, I think his real motivation, he has said this before, was he wasn't sure if he had the resources to put out a full-scale album on Lookout. Remember at the time, Lookout is just like Livermore's label where he can put out the Lookouts, and it's more of a magazine than a record label, quite frankly, at the time. It is with Operation Ivy that they kind of codified themselves into a label. Now, we're not going to go too deep into that because it's more about the actual story of Operation Ivy here, but there was a lot of strife creating that album. They had some production issues that they weren't sure about. They wanted Matt to record out of a clean amp instead of the distorted amp. They eventually switched producers. It was not fun, and it took a lot longer than they had anticipated. But eventually, it turns into... Do I have it here? No. That wasn't very helpful. But somewhere in this house, there is the Energy LP. One of the greatest documents of music we have. Just amazing, youthful energy. And that's such a good way to put it. But I think what I've shown you here, and it's just a small representation of some of the pressures that the band happened to be under at this time. And it's somewhat understandable, right? They're young kids. They just went on their first tour. They're putting out an album. They're becoming huge in a scene that really wasn't designed to become huge. I would say even like the guys in LA, they probably more anticipated that they were going to blow up being in LA. I think the Bay Area was a little bit different. And around this time too, not only is the pressure and the internal tensions starting to heat up, but Tim is starting to have some issues. Now, we know a lot about Tim's issues, but I don't think we quite always realized that they were starting to happen while Operation Ivy was actually going down. Let me go back to my handy-dandy slideshow here. Okay. Let me pull this up. There on the screen for you. Let me pull it up right here. Sorry about that. I just got to move a little bit. I'm sorry. I can't see what I put there. But I'll get it like 2 seconds. Okay, that's just frustrating me, and I don't want to keep stalling this stream, so let me go back to it. On the surface, not all that much had changed. But as Tim remembers, in 1998, it stopped being fun, for me personally. It kind of changed. It wasn't like a family vibe anymore. I thought the energy kind of got darker. Tim's own world was growing darker as well, as he began to sink into what would become a disastrous drinking problem. Alcohol already played a large role in Tim's life. My dad was a drunk. My dad was a drunken crazy, he acknowledged, and that role was about to get larger. Let me look for it here. All right, there we go. It crept up on him, almost unnoticed, because everyone around him was drinking in those days. But an early sign of trouble came when Tim's drinking sometimes interfered with the recording sessions for Op Ivy's album. A lot of times with Radley, I remember I'd get drunk. One time he came to pick me up and I was too fucking drunk to record. That's something that should be told. Around the same time, Operation Ivy played a show at San Francisco's Covered Wagon Saloon, a rare event in those days when upstart East Bay bands were actually given short shrift by their supposedly more sophisticated Frisco cousins. Word had filtered across the Bay. However, the place was packed with big city hipsters, curious to see what all the hype was about. The band didn't give a good account for itself, though, owing almost entirely to Tim being so drunk he had trouble standing up, let alone playing. Tim admits as much. I had been drinking up on Telegraph all day. I drank on the roof of Barrington Hall with some of the kids. I was so annihilated. I could barely put the chords together. It was a mess, all right. It was bad. After the gig, Tim and I had a conversation on the sidewalk in front of the covered wagon. I was furious at him. Drunk or not, it made an impression on Tim. You told me that my drinking wasn't cute anymore. I remember you were referencing a lot of the people you'd known who were dead from drugs and alcohol. That was an amazing thing to have someone be that honest with me. I could go to the covered wagon right now and tell you where we were standing. So this is pretty wild that he remembered this like tongue lashing from Larry Livermore. Now Larry Livermore at the time, you got to remember, he's significantly older than a lot of these guys he's hanging out with. He's probably like my age or maybe your age. And he's hanging around with like these 18, 19, 21-year-old guys. And you have Tim Armstrong just completely like blowing it here. Blowing it visibly in the studio and blowing it in public. And there's other accounts of this incident where not Tim Johan, he's going to get mad. Larry Livermore just goes on to say that more than anything, he was like embarrassed on this night. Yes, he was concerned for his friend, but he was also very, very embarrassed. And as Tim mentioned there, stuff started getting less and less fun. They got into Operation Ivy, I don't think necessarily to be millionaires and billionaires. They got into Operation Ivy because they wanted to get into a band and see where it took them. And when it stopped being enjoyable, they just kind of didn't want to do it anymore. Let's go back to the East Bay Punk Doc and see how they account of the breakup of Operation Ivy.
Tim was he was starting to make these really great flyers, and I remember all of us were hanging out in front of the Berkeley Square, and he came walking up, and he had these little flyers, and he was passing them out, and I was like, it was just seemed weird to look at it. It said Operation Ivy, and then like in parentheses, last show.
I think that guys like that, they were very serious about the art of it. And I think that they felt that the bigger it got, the harder it was to control. And they wanted control over it, which is understandable as an artist.
It started as a small group of friends. But before we knew it, the whole thing got so fucking big.
You got 2,000 kids showing up to a house party, and they're like, we kind of can't do this way anymore.
So Jesse and I, we met up to talk, you know. We each got a beer, we went up to North Side, and he says, it's just not the same no more, you know? I said, yeah, it's not, huh? And we both came to agreement we should break the band up, you know?
I don't even know why exactly things felt like it was time for them to come to a close, but it just sort of organically. I think it started really organically and it ended really organically, and I don't really have any regrets about how long it lasted. I think it was perfect.
I didn't believe that was going to be the last show because so many bands were like, this is our last show, just to get people there. You know, I thought that's what was going on. Okay, maybe they're just going to make another record. You know, hopefully, you know, that's what's going on.
It's like almost impossible to imagine how they fit that many people into Gilman. You know, the capacity, it was originally 299 and then was lowered to 249. Based on how much I counted out and paid to the bands, there probably were 1,000 people came into the club that night.
It was just bittersweet fucking chaos and love and energy, and it was like, I mean, you're knowing that this is it, and you know you want to be in the moment, and I think everybody in the room was in the moment, but afterwards it was like there was a void.
Yeah, we were a band for 2 years, man, and it was hella fun. Then we broke up, and it was over. And then it kind of set in. I was like, oh, fuck. I got no band no more.
Now, what we had there was, in my opinion, a very diplomatic telling of the breakup of the band. I'm not saying that it's not true, but what you got there, told by both Tim and Jess Michaels, is what I believe is the official company line, if you will, on the breakup of the band. Now, Larry Livermore has always had a little bit different take on the breakup of Operation Ivy. So let me pull up my handy dandy slideshow again. Let's see if I can work it this time. So this, what I'm about to read to you, actually comes from Larry Livermore's own book, How to Run/Ruin a Record Label. And here's what he had to say on the evening. David Hayes let me clear that throat. Great audio there. David Hayes lived nearby, and when I worked late in the studio, I often stayed at his place. One such night, I was just going to sleep. Matt and Lint showed up at the door, looking utterly shell-shocked. Before I could ask what was going on, Lint blurted out, "Jesse doesn't want to be in Operation Ivy anymore. We're breaking up." We walked around the deserted, mostly industrial neighborhood, trying to make sense of what had happened, but there was no sense to be made. Normally, I tried not to take the band fights or breakups too seriously. Some bands broke up every time there was a disagreement about the song arrangement or whose turn it was to pay rent on the practice space. It would typically be forgotten about by the next gig or recording session that rolled around. Operation Ivy was not that kind of band. I can't remember a single time they told me this is how it's going to be, only later to say, we changed our minds. Maybe Jess didn't mean what he said, I suggested, or you guys need a little time off. But I knew in my heart neither of those things was true. It was the end of Operation Ivy, and nothing would ever be the same again. No matter what I told them, you'll always have a home at Lookout. They nodded numbly. Their musical future was the last thing they were thinking about. Our triumphant record release party had been transformed into a wake. The same bands would play, but the tone would be so different. Would it also be a requiem for the East Bay scene? Many great bands remained, and the club was going stronger than ever. But Operation Ivy stood out and towered over everything so completely. It was hard to imagine what it would be like going on without them. That is super interesting. So, and this story has been told many times. After they had the famous summit on the roof, then they went and they broke the news to Larry Livermore, who essentially was their boss at this time, if you want to think about it like that. Now, Livermore has a little bit different take than the band has on this. The band has said, and as was mentioned there, that it's this mutual agreement that they came up with. They are splitting the band up, that they are going to be no more. However, Livermore seems to think that it was much more the work of Jess Michaels in this case. It was Jess who just didn't want to be in the band. And he said as much because he said, Tim and Matt came to his house devastated, not knowing what to do, and continuously saying, Jess doesn't want to be in the band anymore. Jess doesn't want to be in the band anymore. Now, what's the truth on that? I would say it's probably somewhere in the middle. I could see there's probably a scenario where they all had issues. They all had tensions, as Tim said right there. Things were not the same. They were young kids. They had to figure their shit out. That happens. That's life. And maybe Jess was the one that initiated it and suggested it and said, hey, guys, maybe we don't want to do this anymore. I think that can be plausible, and Matt and Tim could be devastated by the breakup of the band. Let's dive a little more into Livermore's take on the situation. Now, this is going to come to us from Smash, a book that I cite way too often on here. If you watch enough of my streams, you're eventually just going to get like all of Smash. You're going to get all of Smash piece by piece. Okay. Here is what Livermore had to say a little bit more on the breakup. The official party line was that they mutually broke up, but my take on it was the official party line was that they mutually broke up, but my take on it, as well as that of several of the people who were close with them, is that it didn't happen that way. Jesse was from a different background from them. They were working class and everything was about playing music. That had been their lifelong goal since they were small children. Jess was more of a, I hesitate to call him a dilettante because he's still a working artist today, although he does painting and writing. But his attitude was, oh, I'll try being in a band and I'll see if this is fun. Oh, it's not fun anymore, so I'll do something different. It's the privilege of being from a middle class background. But Tim and Matt could not completely comprehend why someone would do that. Being working class myself, I relate to that. I thought, why would you give up the opportunity of doing something great? This was in the final stages of the record, and I think we were working on the artwork. So as you can see right there, Larry Livermore puts a lot of this on Jess Michaels. And honestly, like with his last comment there, I don't think that's completely fair when he talks about the background of the members and that's what impacted it. As if, Tim and Matt are these working class dudes with just nothing to lose. So they're going to go all in on this thing that's already been successful in Operation Ivy. And he kind of frames Jess Michaels as this, kind of spoiled rich kid that'll do whatever the wind, wherever the wind blows. He likes something for a while, he's going to do it. If he doesn't like it, he's not going to do it. Whatever. I do think, though, that was probably his prerogative. If they weren't having fun, if they weren't enjoying it, if they weren't doing what their original vision was to do it, even if it was Jess Michaels who initiated the breakup, I think that's okay. And I don't think we should put the burden of this on Michaels at all. And I kind of think it's always fallen on him, right? Because when people talk about why Operation Ivy never got back together, a lot of people always put that on Jess Michaels. And he said it there in that clip we watched earlier. He has no qualms about the band ending. And also in Punk USA, which I'll cite later, but I'm not going to cite this specifically, Jess Michaels talks about it. They didn't feel like they were like super, super famous. Yeah, they were big in their scene at the time, but they did kind of feel like they were just in a band. And so it wasn't, at least in his perspective, the biggest deal in the world probably to break up. Now, did Matt and Tim take it differently? Clearly they did. But I don't think we should put all of that on Jess Michaels. Now, we've talked in and around about that last show. And luckily, and give a shout out here to 3 cameras and a microphone on YouTube. Give it a subscribe, comment, share the videos. So many great videos from so many different artists, including a video of May 28th, 1989. We all know what happened in Gilman Street on May 28th, 1989. That is that legendary show. That is the album release / bye-bye Operation Ivy. And as the Green Day guys said there in that clip as well, it's like, well, was it really going to be their last show? Was it just going to be hype? And to this day, it is still their last show. We've had Bad Optics, who I think was amazing in that song that they put out. We've had Jess Michaels come on stage with Rancid in the past, or with the Muzak crew whenever they were doing last year. But for all intents and purposes, this is the end of Operation Ivy. So let's kick back. Let me drink some of my tea, rest my voice for a little bit, and let's check out a little bit of the final Operation Ivy show. And I'll just be upfront with my bias. I picked this as the song for us to view because it's my favorite Operation Ivy song. I think it's probably most people's favorite Operation Ivy song. Yes, I'm a normie Operation Ivy listener. God, Knowledge is such a great song. What a great song. Lyrically, too, it spoke to me, when I was 18, when all I knew is that I didn't know nothing. 35 years later, or not 35 years later, good God. And I'm not even 35. I'm older than that, but you get the point. I still don't know nothing. I mean, look at my future now. It is looking fucking narrow. Good God, all our futures are bleak right now. But that's a little snapshot of that final show at Gilman Street. Now, in Smash, Ian Winwood does go on to correct the record. It's actually not their last show. They actually play a friend's party the next day. Which, what a trip must that have been for everyone. Can we just focus on that for a second? How weird was that? That they have like this big emotional send-off. Over capacity. Probably 1,000 people in Gilman Street. Like, thankfully, no one got hurt. I mean that in all honesty. Like, thank God no one got hurt that night. That had to be something else. Some type of just totally rad and out there experience. And then the next day they played again, like one last time, and probably just said, "See you later." It's so weird though. What a weird vibe that whole show. The next day had to have been. And how cool would it have been to be at this show? Now, if Livermore claims there was probably 1,000 people based on the payouts, there's probably about 3,000 people around the East Bay that claimed they were there. Especially as like the lore of the show probably grew as the years went on. Lord only knows how people like to embellish that shit. All right. So it's not though, and I think most of you know it, but we're gonna have some fun exploring this stuff. It's not as if Tim and Matt and even the Mello Brothers stopped making music. In fact, they continued to make music. They continued to make a lot of music, or at least try to make a lot of music, between the years of 1989 and 1993. Now, we're going to explore some of those musical projects, although I think it would be really fun if anyone else on the good old YouTubes ever wants to make a complete, like, full cut of all the underground bands and every piece of music that Matt and Tim were involved in prior to Rancid, but post Operation Ivy. But for now, YouTube, this will be the document you're going to have to deal with. So one of the first bands that they were trotting out there, and I think the one that is probably most known for this in-between era, is Downfall. Now, the thing about Downfall is they got branded, I think, as Operation Ivy 2.0. But there was some changes that had to be made because it kind of gives credence to the story, right? That it was Jess Michaels that broke up the band when he's the only member not in Downfall. You even have an extra Mello, and you have the one other guy too. Let's check out a little bit of Downfall. There's a little bit of it on the internet. It was on some comps. Here's a song called New Regulation. I just picked this out because it was one clean file to watch, but definitely go on a deep dive of some Downfall and tell me if you think it was too derivative of Operation Ivy. But let's hear what they had for just this one song. Listen to this. If we're honest, it probably sounds more like Rancid than Op Ivy. It sounds like Life Won't Wait Rancid more so than just pure Op Ivy Scott-tastic. Op Ivy. You understand, though, even though I mentioned that it is more, I felt like derivative of Ska Rancid, which didn't exist yet, than of what Operation Ivy was. You understand, though, how you could be a kid in the East Bay and you hear that and be like, well, that's cool, but can we just have Op Ivy? Can we just have Op Ivy? And ultimately, Downfall, while being cool and they played some shows and they did some things, they ultimately flamed out. They flamed out because of Tim's issues and just the difficulty of making it, which is what happened to a lot of these bands. And again, we're still in a primordial phase. Yes, Operation Ivy had hit, but Operation Ivy wasn't like national yet at that point. Green Day hadn't yet hit. Suffer was coming out, but I don't think people were really equating the two just yet. More on that later. So you kind of understand why they were spinning their wheels a little bit in this time period. Although, to their credit, they always made really, really, really good music. Now, early Rancid is kind of funky, I think, and we'll talk maybe a little bit about the 1993 album at the end of the stream, maybe, maybe not. But Rancid, I think, set out initially to be a much more intense band than what they're mostly known for, or should I say what I really like them for the, the Life Won't Wait, the Let's Go, Out Come the Wolves, Indestructible, Dominoes Fall style of Rancid. Now you listen to those new songs that have come out, and I got a reaction video to each one on my channel, so go check those out if you haven't. Listen to those new songs. They're definitely going in the more hardcore element, the hardcore direction, which they do very, very well, although I kind of prefer a little more light-hearted Rancid. Now, one of the bands that Tim and Matt put together in this intervening period is a band called Generator, which was not based, and I repeat this, not based on the Bad Religion album. But it was their more intense contribution to the musical scene. And they did get to play at Gilman a couple of times. One of which, thanks to Bay Area Punk Shows, who is a great source of footage on YouTube. If you guys like the Tony Sly video I did, that all came from Bay Area Punk Shows. Go ahead, give that channel a follow. Check out the stuff. You can watch the whole Fat Records 25th anniversary show. Almost all of it is there on that channel. Go check that out. But the channel also has some Generator. One of probably the only pieces of footage we have of Generator. You see, like a section like that would be almost foreign in a Rancid song. Now, right there, when you hear Tim singing, you do hear a lot of proto Rancid in there, I think, but it's just not as refined. Now, obviously, this is good stuff. It's good punk rock. I don't think it stands out, though. I don't think it stands out the way Rancid would eventually stand out. And in my opinion, if you take Downfall and Generator and combine them, you kind of get what Rancid became. I think Rancid is probably representation of those two bands, kind of the best parts of them. But as you can see, I mean, Tim and Matt, they were throwing the wall at anything, just to see what stuck, and nothing was sticking. Nothing was sticking. Not that the music wasn't heralded. People liked the music. People were into the music. They just kind of couldn't get their shit together. One other band we're going to explore from this intermediate period. We're actually not going to explore them at all. We're just going to kind of talk about them, and we're going to watch a little bit of a pretty funny video that I found online. So,
let's check it out.
Another contribution that Matt and Tim have to music is one that's actually very subtle. And it's that they formed the original version of the Dancehall Crashers. Now, we know the Dancehall Crashers these days are kind of, I wouldn't say legendary ska, but very well-respected ska band. Been through a lot of members. I think of Karina Deneke, obviously, that plays with NoFX as a part of the Dancehall Crashers. And their initial conception of the Dancehall Crashers was, let's do another ska band, but it's, instead of it being like this Operation Ivy style band, let's do something more in the rock steady vein of ska. And that was their aim. However, they didn't really stick Matt and Tim with the band for very long. They kind of just like formed it and then pieced out. There's a little bit of footage though. There's some of the demo, which I'm not even sure how much they played on. But there's some footage around the internet of a really, 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 really young Tim Armstrong. And let's just have some fun seeing this super, super baby Tim right here.
Welcome to my segment. This is Lance here. I'm in Oaktown, out in front of a place called the Practice Pad. A lot of bands practice here. A lot of bands have come from this place and gone on to other things. And I'm going to go interview a band that maybe will blossom and go someplace else besides where we are right now. So why don't you come upstairs with me and have a good time. I got a great show planned for you guys. Come on, let's go upstairs.
All right, let's go upstairs with Tim. With his Raiders jacket and his handkerchief.
Hey, how you doing, Kobe? What's up? Pretty good, man. What are you up to? Drinking some more water, you know? Right on. Here's a man who practice what you preach. Yeah, first and slowly fluids, you know. I try to stay away from too much sugar.
Wait, is that Karina right there? No, that can't be.
Maybe. I've practiced here in the past from all kinds of music ranging from metal to reggae to hardcore to rap. The band will be meeting is a band called Dancehall Crashers. Now let's find out what they're all about.
Let me find some stuff of that online, Archivist, and I'll play it here. So you definitely see the influence of all the ska that wasn't the Rancid branch of ska. You definitely see it right here.
So right here is Eric, and he's gonna introduce the band. I'm the drummer. This is Jamie down here. Jamie plays guitar. And this is Elise, one of our vocalists, and that's Karina, and that's Jason, and that's the other Jason, Jesus for short.
All right, let's check out this song, Archivist. I found it on here. This is why I like doing this live, because as I mentioned, I knew there was more stuff, and I didn't really have time to get all of it. But we can always squeeze in a little more. Plus, this is going really well, and I'm not fumbling over my words so much, so I'm not having to repeat stuff over and over and over again. Shout out to Journey to the End 666 for posting this. So very, very horn heavy. So we got the guy from Skank and Pickle in this too. Jeez. Jack had a bottle and ham last time I sent. No, I'm just playing. Okay, I know I made the Life Won't Wait analogy earlier, but you could imagine like Lars Fredrickson singing that on Life Won't Wait, right? With a little bit higher production value, but I mean not much. Holy hell! Thanks for exposing this, archivist. God said, boy, you're gonna pay the cost. It's two different worlds, and you better not cross the line. They gotta knock it right. They're coming back. 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 Yeah, no, that's wild, archivist, because that would have been before Life Won't Wait too. So that's amazing. That's good stuff. Bravo. All right. Now, as I mentioned though, these bands, they ain't happening for Tim. Tim's not finding the global stardom that he would eventually find with Rancid with these bands. And he's mostly to blame. Let's go back and check out. Yeah, I'll definitely give that a shot. Give that a listen. Archivist for sure. Let's go back to our little playlist there. And let's hear Tim. I titled this video because I cut these. Don't tell anyone, but I cut these off of the original Amazon cut just so they're nice and laid out for me. And I titled it, next to Downfall, I have Tim and Matt talk about his downfall. Which, by the way, any members out there, shout out. Got the first members over the weekend. I will make this I'll find a way to make this playlist as like a members playlist. All these videos are unlisted. And if you ever want to just kind of go through that, I'm going to try to make that a regular thing on these streams. But let's look at a quick clip of Tim and Matt talking about the downfall.
After Operation Ivy broke up, my drinking got really bad. You know, I would drink and drink and drink till I couldn't go no more.
You have to have a certain amount of responsibility to play in a band. You have to show up, you have to practice, you have to work on stuff. But, he couldn't get a thought going. I mean, it's sad. It's like, it destroys, it fucks you up.
And I was fucking everything up. I ran downfall into the ground, generator into the ground.
He was fucking up.
So yeah, Tim is not in a good place, and there's a lot of accounts of this. Most of it's about the same. I had found an old article from Spin Magazine that I was going to bust out. I found some old stuff from Alternative Press, but I actually thought Livermore was the go-to source on this. So let me pull that up again real quick here. All right. So here's what Livermore had to say. Between 89, when Op Ivy broke up, and through the downfall and generator years, I was hospitalized 3 times for alcohol and drug abuse. This is, of course, the voice of Tim. One time, I almost died. My brother Jeff ran into me on Telegraph Avenue, and I had a 3.9 alcohol level. Editor's note, nearly 5 times the level required to convict someone of drunk driving, and sometimes enough to be fatal. I was passed out in his car, and they took me to the doctor, and the doctor was like, "Your brother is trying to kill himself." In and out of detox, disappearing for days and weeks at a time, malnourished and broke, Tim looked to be headed for a premature and tragic demise. But a few people stuck by him, most notably Matt, who had to bear the brunt of Tim's descent into madness, driving him to detox centers, rescuing him from one predicament after another, even giving him money for food until he discovered that any money would almost be surely spent on more of the booze that was slowly but surely killing his best friend. It got to the point of, what are you going to use it for? Are you going to buy booze with it? And he'd be like, "No, I'm hungry." And I'd be like, "Okay, fine. Let's go get something to eat." Ultimately, Matt had to take the most drastic step of all. He stopped playing music with Tim, broke up the partnership that had meant everything to him, and that had brought him most of the success and happiness that he had known. So once again, sticking to our central theme and to what our thumbnail was, right? The power of friendship. And in this case, it was tough love, and it was difficult. And Tim was really in the dumps here. He was not well. And you kind of get it, right? You had kind of a support system that fell apart. Operation Ivy, for maybe its flaws, maybe it had some, maybe it didn't. But it was a sense of stability for these guys, right? And they're young guys, they have something going, and they ruin it. And Tim's got his substance abuse issues. You have substance abuse issues that run in Tim's family. And he's also being cut off by that family. He's not allowed to stay at his mother's house anymore in this era. His brother will care for him, but is not going to enable him. So Tim is absolutely down in the dumps here. There's another bit by Livermore that I think we're going to check out here. Give me 1 second to fire it up. Oh, okay. And we're going to talk a little bit about Tim's turnaround. Actually, we'll watch the video first, and then we'll read about it.
And finally, he went down, and he got into the Salvation Army program, which was in downtown Oakland, and he stayed there, and, it kicked his fucking ass. It wasn't bullshit, He got out of there, and he started getting his life together, and he's like, "I want to do a band."
Yeah, so Matt Freeman made a deal with me. He said, "Listen, man, I'm tired of getting my heart broken. Start a band with you and you get drunk and fuck everything up. So I'll play music with you, but I'm not going to join your band officially until you get a year sober." I go up to Matt Freeman, I say, "Homeboy, I got a year sober. Let's do this."
It's like a Rocky movie. Let's get to work.
So, it took a long time to re-earn that trust of Matt. He had to prove himself. And that's like weird for a relationship maybe between like two guys that are contemporaries, but and the guy was an addict. He had his problems. And it was affecting people around him. It was affecting the bands that they were in. So you completely understand it from Matt's perspective. Let's dive back into Livermore here. And here's what he's talking about them, reforming and playing again. He says, "This is Larry Livermore here. The opportunity came when Matt was invited to join MDC, long one of his favorite bands. Side note here, just really quick, I believe Operation Ivy actually opened for MDC on like one of their initial shows and blew them out of the water. It would be the first time in years that Matt and Tim were no longer playing music together, but the partnership wasn't completely dissolved. When MDC set out on tour, Matt took Tim along as his roadie. There were other, even more short-lived attempts at playing together. A purely ska band called Shakin' 69, which we just heard, and an almost metal-tinged punk group named Generator, which we also just heard. But when Matt followed up his tenure in MDC by joining the Grups, a new band being put together by Jesse Blatz and Kamala Carnivore, it looked as though Matt and Tim's story, the musical part of it anyway, might have reached an end. Matt, after all, was getting on with his life, playing shows and going on tour, while Tim seemed to have hit rock bottom. Even his mother wouldn't let him stay at her house anymore, and he wound up in a Salvation Army shelter, working for them in exchange for a bed. A humiliating place, he says. But I really had nowhere to go. Nowhere that was but up for some reason, somehow. Let me start that quote over here. Nowhere that was but up. For some reason, somehow, it was that point that Tim found the strength to not drink anymore. Matt was happy but still wary. As the weeks and months went by, Tim was not drinking and not drinking. But I was still waiting for the phone call, And it wasn't that he didn't want to have faith in his friend. There was nothing I wanted more than for the fucking thing to work out, he says. But after all he'd been through, he wasn't about to rush into anything. So again, we established more of that respect that he had to build. Now, at the time of the Salvation Army, I think Rancid fans know how pivotal that was, not only for the development of Tim and his sobriety, like it was, Tim didn't do a 12-step program. He did the Salvation Army. And he worked, he did the volunteer work where they would go famously into these really rich neighborhoods and pick up their donations of stuff like not even used at all, or very lightly used. And of course, as we all know, that experience became the inspiration for this song right here that we're going to watch while I rest my voice.
You guys still having a good time? It's finally nice to be in a place where it's somewhat warm out.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that archivist. Just gotta find exactly what angle I'd want to take on it.
Without any hurricanes and tornadoes and shit. All right. For the sun.
And that just shows you, and as Archivist pointed out, goosebumps. I wanted to put that in there. Again, a planned spot to kind of rest my voice, but also to illustrate the influence of this time in Tim's life. And I mean, go through self-titled especially, tons of lyrics that are clearly influenced by this time in his life. But I think the important outcome, outside, of course, of him getting sober, which probably saved his life, was they got together. Now, they got together with, I believe he was Tim's roommate, and I could be wrong on that, but with Brett Reed. Now, Brett Reed was just kind of a dude that hung out, and there's like not a lot known about Brett Reed. I wish he would do like a podcast or something, or if he's done one, let me know in the chat. Brett Reed, I think, was just like their roommate and just kind of knew how to play drums and kind of figured it out, but eventually he did, and that would form the sound of Rancid. Now, Rancid, though, needed a home, right? They needed a home. And naturally, the natural fit for Rancid, you would think, would be Lookout Records. Makes sense, right? Especially at this point. I mean, it's not even 1994 yet. Dookie hasn't even broken the, maybe you could argue against Green Day, but the band of the Gilman and the Lookout scene was still Operation Ivy. And in fact, something that I didn't put here in the documentation, but I uncovered in my research, part of why or how Tim was, I think, able to get it together around this point is, we talked about him having to bum money from Matt and stuff so much. I think Livermore finally was one of the rare times of people getting paid, and he actually started to get paid for Op Ivy, and the royalties started to come in, and the album was starting to circulate, and it was growing and growing and growing over time, as we knew it would. Obviously, it wasn't at the fever pitch that it would become as Rancid got more popular. So in return, Op Ivy got more popular to the point that it kind of ended the record label. I mean, I think Green Day was a little more significant, but it was definitely there. Oh, and shout out to Screeching Weasel for his role in all of that. Let's talk about, though, like the potential of them on Lookout, or some of their relationship with Lookout. Now, to do that, I am going to reference a book that I talked about in a stream a couple of months ago. It is Punk USA by Kevin Preston. Great book if you haven't checked it out, and a good reference for stuff like this. So let's check out what they got to say in this book. And I'll put up a little graphic on the screen so it kind of goes with it. It's in a weird spot. I'll read this little intro part. It's not up on the screen, and then the part coming on the screen. And the subheading of this is Rancid, keeping it real. Or excuse me, Rancid, keeping it in the family. With Operation Ivy off the scene, several bands popped up in the wake of the ska punk pioneers. The Dancehall Crushers, Downfall, Big Rig, and the short-term band Generator, formed by Operation Ivy guitarist Tim Lint Armstrong. As Generator was winding down, Armstrong spoke to Applegreen about a new band, Rancid. He was putting together with Matt Freeman of Operation Ivy. And Applegreen, again, is the guy that basically took over for Larry Livermore. They were partners at one point, and then when Livermore departed, Applegreen really becomes like the main dude at Lookout. Applegreen would say, the East Bay scene was still sort of in its own bubble at the time. Things hadn't gotten too crazy, so it was natural for us to talk to Rancid about doing a record. I don't know if they had any other labels that talked to him at the time, but it seemed like it was really important for Tim to avoid much of the hassle and bullshit that went along with the personal politics of being in a band. I don't know what his experiences were, but it seemed like he wanted to focus on working with people he could trust rather than scene veterans. We had these cool plans for them to go in and record a bunch of EPs over time, and then to release a single album collecting all the tracks, hence the title, Single Number 1. So the original plan was for them to release music, and a lot of music, on Lookout Records. And if you look at the history of Lookout Records, if you give this book a read, which I definitely recommend that you do, you'll find that was a lot of early Lookout was the collection of some of these EPs and then putting them into an LP, and that's common in punk rock. Still happens. This is the writer now, Kevin Preston, voice. Armstrong and Freeman inducted. Yes. Let me start that over again. I almost said indicted. Armstrong and Freeman inducted drummer Brent Reid into the ranks initially, creating a power punk trio along the lines of scrappy, upbeat music played by Crimpshine and Grimple. Rancid turned out some quality local live performances attended by Applegreen prior to the release of what would be the self-titled 7-inch EP, and it's actually Lookout number 59, in 1992. The band went to the studio to cut 10 songs for a 5-song EP, and even fitting that many songs onto the record sacrificed the sound quality a great deal. I remember going back and forth with Tim about that, but ultimately he decided it was better to get more songs and shittier sound than better sound on fewer tracks. And it's funny because like Rancid actually sounds pretty well produced for most of their career. I actually don't have any production issues with them. There's some changes that they made, and I think they've had to do a few little tricks in the last couple of years. But they've always done the song stuffing. Like that has never changed. It shocked me that there was a B-sides and C-sides album to come out. Because what the hell could be left over after you had like 79 songs on Let's Go? But it is what it is. And here's something Andy Ernst, the producer, also had to say. Years after the fact, Tim told me he was nervous the first time he recorded with me. But I never noticed it. I did notice that their bass player, Matt Freeman, was awesome. Rancid knew what they were doing, so everything moved quickly. All of the earliest Lookout band recordings were on a tight budget, so everything moved fast. And it had to. Let's check out a little bit of that EP. Now that EP, there's some stuff that's here online. It goes for like a lot of money. If any of you guys have it and feel like partnering with it, just send it as a donation. So this is a piece of the original Rancid. So these guys in Rancid, they've been around, 30 years. We're celebrating 30 years of their first album, a little bit longer. They go back to the 80s and Op Ivy and punk history and setting up ska, and Tim Armstrong has contributed to pop music and all this good stuff. Kind of lazy with naming their albums. They have named 3 different releases simply Rancid. You have this. You have 93, that's celebrating its 30th anniversary tomorrow. And then you have Rancid 2000, which deserves a little bit of introspection by me. That's all I'm going to say on that. Let's check out some samplings of this Rancid EP. Shout out to Andres Skunks, who posted this online. Very Let's Go sounding. You also have those matte bass lines, as Archivist was pointing out earlier, for the Shakin' 69 song. And it's amazing. This is Rancid. Like, that's just straight up. Like, if it's recorded a little bit cleaner, you just say, oh, okay, that's early 90s Rancid. Sounds amazing.
Shut up and shut down.
What's it running, Archivist? me see. I could do a little bit of research. Oh, shoot, that's it? I'm just gonna go ahead and buy that. Like, I'd pick that up.
I'm not the only one.
It's not well circulated though. It's not something I feel like we have a lot of knowledge on. Let's take out some other samples of this real quick, and then we'll move on to something else.
I'll step back here, let's go back, but even when you're alive, let's get real and feel the vibe. Let's keep going, the bullshit is, I ain't stopping. Battering ram, right through you. Battering ram, right through you. Some people got no alliance, some people are shit. Some people got no validity, no, not a bit. Some people wanna break down what's inside of you. They can't, but go right through them. I'm a very damn. Been running my whole life and I'm still running. Many times I'm doubting too. Beat the lines just like it flew. That's what shit was not to say. I'm still taking out of my way. I guess I'm gonna take them out. Cause it's not the other about. I'm my method. I ain't stopping. Battering ram. Right through you.
So good. So good. I know Lars has talked about hearing this and just being like, shit, I want to be in that band. And it makes sense because it was really good and they were picking up steam, but they didn't necessarily get like royalty treatment at first. I believe early in their time, they're playing the shows, they're playing Gilman, doing the chores at Gilman. I think they were specifically responsible for cleaning out like the women's restroom at Gilman, which apparently was enough to make anyone vomit. I don't know what the hell was going on at early Gilman, but doesn't sound too good. Does not sound too good. So, but it's cool though. Like Rancid has their shit together. They're in good shape. Now they do pick up with Epitaph. That's where they catch on to because Mr. Brett Gurwitz loved Operation Ivy, thought it was great, and so he wanted to sign Rancid. And if you know anything about the history of Lookout, it was the right decision. It was the right decision. Let's watch a quick little snippet of Brett Gurwitz talking about signing Bad Religion. He had to work to sign Bad Religion in 2002. Not in this era. My bad.
And one day I got a phone call at Epitaph from Tim Armstrong. And he said he was at the Salvation Army and he was getting sober. He wasn't in Op Ivy anymore, but him and Matt were going to do a band. I said, okay, well, I love you. I love your songs. I love your voice. Same goes for Matt and his bass playing. And when you guys do a band, if you want to be on Epitaph, I want to sign you. Get sober, take care of yourself, and when you're ready, I'm ready to do it.
Right?
And it was just like that. The rest was history. Now, it's not like they cut all their ties with Lookout Records either, though, during this time. In fact, they still had plans to work with Lookout because it's not like these guys were just so locked in on all these crazy contracts that they could never touch each other or never be, never have any cross-pollination. I guess I don't have a little graphic for that part. So you guys are just going to have to watch the top of my bald head as I read. Because that's what's great, right? Watching someone read on camera. And it goes on a chapter talking about actually the potential of a release of a Downfall album, which didn't come out. And some of the side projects that they had going on. But here's what the author had to say here. Once Rancid formed and had moved on to record for Epitaph, Lookout still wanted to release a Rancid of Veil split 7-inch EP, Lookout 83, and scheduled it to come out close to the already recorded Downfall CD, LK 99, but both records were cancelled prior to release. Vinyl labels were already printed for the split. however, and were given away free with mail orders. I wonder if that's circulating. Archivist, you're on the case. Is that circulating? And this is what Chris Applegreen has to say. We really worked hard on the Downfall CD. We found the original tapes, baked them, and then took them to LA to remix with Lars Fredriksson, Tim, and Mr. Brett. Brett Reed, of course. This is not Mr. Brett, the Mr. Brett that we normally talk about. The recordings that are available online are the original mixes, but because Tim had used some of the lyrics for Rancid, he cut some new vocal parts with different lyrics and also found a song that Matt sang. It was kind of like a rock and roll song, like Rolling Stones or something. Really cool. We also worked on a Downfall dub track, and Jess Michaels had already drawn some cover art. It was geared for a release right around the time of the Rancid Avail split EP. Then I had a meeting with Tim and Matt, and basically, I think that Rancid was starting to get really big and came to understand that they couldn't keep recording for various small labels, doing splits and comp cuts, so they felt they needed to focus on Rancid. They told us the split was canceled and the Downfall release would come out, but not until after the next Rancid album when they could work on it again. They never really found the time to finish the work, and it sort of languished. Close to being released since ever. So that was frustrating for a Lookout. No, yeah, but you're a generalized archivist, right? You're an archivist of all trades. You know what, archive? What I need some account to come in and they be California punk archivist, okay? And I need an archivist in each state, just have you guys working and all the tentacles that are spreading around there. So, you know, they were gonna keep working with them. It kind of just got a little too big, and they kind of moved on. It seems like from Lookout, like not in a negative way, but yeah. All right. Let's see Tim, and this is from the 1994 doc, which is available in its entirety on YouTube. And I had to do a little bit of audio sweetening on this because this would not pass the copyright test when I ran a dry run at it, so I had to cut out. I think there's a cut of like a Dina playing or something like that, and I had to cut that out so we can just hear Tim talking, but it's a little muddled.
Operation Ivy guys going to Epitaph Records. Northern Cal. We were actually the first non-Southern California band in this label. Brett goes, he goes, I love your tape, man.
And that's amazing because think about this, and I never really put this together until like last night when I was thinking about this. There's a funny relationship that Rancid has to the other Epitaph bands of the time. Is that true, Archivist? They never made a dime. That's a bummer. It's such a good doc too. I should get in touch with who. I don't know. Do you know who made it? What state were they in? You think about like when you think like that 90s punk, right? And that's my shorthand just for like good punk rock. I'm like NoFX and Pennywise and Bad Religion and Rancid. And one of those things is not like the other. Not that generically Rancid doesn't fit in with those bands, but they're like completely different, right? They are completely different than those bands in a lot of ways. And it's like, and this is why, because they were the Bay Area band that came in. Obviously, you know, NoFX kind of LA and San Francisco, all over the place, but you get the idea. Man, if those dudes ever want to do like a screening where I could play that thing in entirety, that would be a hell of a live stream. Need to connect with those guys.
It's amazing. It's cassette tape. I love it. But one thing's gonna change. And I was like, what's that? He said, the name. I said, the name? He said, yeah, man. Rancid, man. You gotta come up with a better name than that. And I'm like, what are you talking about, man? I'm like, I don't even know Brad that well, but I'm arguing with him. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, what's his name? Rancid. What kind of name is that? I go, that's a punk rock name, man. I go, look, listen to me. We ain't from Orange County or like LA. From the East Bay, bro. I play with Neurosis, man. We play with Grinch. We play with Grimple and fucking, you know what I mean? Like, I ain't gonna have no like happy name. Like, I don't even know what I was talking about. I love LA hardcore, man.
Well, it's funny because even a lot of the bands that he talked about, not all of them, But all those East Bay bands have like these badass names, and I think even Rancid, sometimes their packaging was a little misleading. I remember like being really into Rancid and people thinking it was more similar to like the Misfits or even more similar to like a darker punk or metal than like this fun ska band that it was. But the packaging of a lot of those Berkeley bands is a lot darker than what the actual product is.
But because I believe in it so much, you know what I mean? In my name. He didn't, I think. And I always bring that up to him, too. Whenever he doubts me about something, I go, man, I don't know, Brett, you didn't even like my band name. Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
At the end of the 80s, the California punk scene had reemerged as a
And that was a fun little thing. But there's one other little thread we have to close up here. That's a lot of... let me check Cliff Notes version. There's more about it in some of the books I references. There's more about it in other books and other interviews. And I had to limit my research because I basically have like 2 days to do research on this video. It's just my own production process right now. In the next month, my schedule lightens up for a little while, so I should be able to expand that out. But I don't know how much more research would really be relevant to a stream like this, especially when I got people like in the chat that can also contribute to the research. But so there is more. Definitely there is more. But that is kind of Cliff Notes version. But there's this one fun story that we do have to always talk about. And my title here for this video simply says, BJ almost joins. So you can figure out what I'm talking about there.
And it was right at a point where we're a three-piece, Rancid's a three-piece. And I'm thinking, do we want
to... And for context here, that's obviously Matt Freeman and Tim Armstrong and Tim's brother, who just seems like the most heartfelt dude in the world.
Make it a four-piece, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, Billy, you want to jump on stage? We got a show Gilman. You want to play a set with us? And he, you know, Billy loves playing music, you know? So he's like, you don't ask him twice.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, hell yeah. And it was a fun show. And he had an extra power. And he's a great player, right, obviously. He was super serious. Like, I would join your band right now, but I'm in another band. Like, and I'm like, okay, no, we're good, bro. And that was a deciding moment after that show. I go to Matt like, man, we gotta get another guitar player.
So it's called radio.
And just give you a preview of what we're gonna watch next. So it's interesting, you know, that's kind of the lore, right? That Billy Joe Armstrong was almost in Rancid, and what an alternate history that is. Who knows how history plays? Does Rancid become Green Day? Like, I don't think so. I actually think it worked out the best the way it worked out, with him, you know, Green Day blowing up and helping punk explode, and then Rancid coming out with Lars Frederiksen and Tim Armstrong. And the doc really frames it as that's the sort of that moment, as Tim's talking about there. Instead of just being that power punk trio, can you really add the layers? And by the way, as an aside, Tim Armstrong, what a great move that was for you to make. Because by doing that ensured you will never have to play guitar at a live show ever again. You just will out Lars and you're good. You're good. But again, I think history played out the way it was supposed to play out. But there is a contribution, a very, very distinct contribution, that Billy Joe Armstrong of Green Day does have to Rancid. And, you know, Tim and Billy Joe, they're not brothers, but they got the same last name. Or as Fat Mike said it, they're also the nephew of Louis Armstrong. But Billy Joe helped write what, in my opinion, is, you know, top 1 or 2 all-time Rancid songs.
Never fell in love till I fell in love with you. Never know what a good time was, so I had a good time with you. If you wanna get the feeling and you wanna get it right, then the music's gotta be loud for a winner. Music, it's I feel no pain at all. What's over night? I'm drinking with my day. These are the good and love that ain't on my head. Lord, gave more love to this bottle of wine. So I go out for love of the kind. Here it is, here I am, to the fucking eye. I like that. music. I got a place to go. Got the music. I got a place to go. When I got the music. I got a place to go. When I got the music. I got a place to go. When I got the music. I got a place to go.
This video is kind of funny because it's like the reverse alternate universe. Like, what if it was the opposite and Green Day was like, "Hey, we need a second guitarist. We need someone to help Billy Joel with the songwriting. Let's bring in Lint. Let's bring him in. See what he's got going on." And bam, that's Green Day. And that kind of leads us to them recording the new album. Now, the new album that turned 30 tomorrow. I have said it before, and I will say it again. Self-Titled's probably my least favorite Rancid album. The 93 version of Self-Titled. My second least favorite is the 2000 version, although I like that one significantly more. That is my own opinion, and I completely understand and accept that that is not a popular opinion among Rancid fans. And as I listened to the album quite a bit in the last couple of days just to get it back in my head, and I forgot how much I had listened to the album over the years, because in my mind it's one that's not necessarily imprinted in my brain, but it was. I listened to that album quite a bit. I just comparing that. Okay, so there's a few things, and 31 TV, who I'll have a podcast coming up eventually when I get to editing it down on my channel probably later this week, and I'm recording with him tomorrow night, as I mentioned earlier when we're talking about early shows. I always, in my head, I was like, okay, well, I don't like it as much because it doesn't have the ska of And Out Come the Wolves. And 31 TV kind of expertly pointed out, well, then why do you like Let's Go so much? And I'm like, damn, good point. And I said, well, maybe it's the Lars of it all. And, Lars is around the debut album, but he's not quite there on it. He joins the band very, very quickly after. A very similar story to him joining the band as Tim's joining the band. It's about like this rehab, promise of sobriety project. And I think, well, that's part of it. I also just think straight up the songs are better on Let's Go, if I'm being honest with you. There's not a radio. There's not a Sidekick, a Salvation, a Nihilism, a St. Mary's, Jimmy and Johnny, two friends of mine, Skinhead, what they claim. To me, that moment doesn't exist on the Self-Titled album. Self-Titled album's great. It's one of the great albums of all time. It's awesome. To me, it's just not at the level of their other work, and I think that's okay, although... Again, I do get quite a bit of pushback when I bring that up. Can't really play much from the Self-Titled album because it will get flagged on here, but there are some live clips here. I was gonna play Matt doing Rats in the Hallway on the Rancid's YouTube channel, but that one kind of had the original version. But go check it out. Remember during the start of the pandemic when Matt would do all those songs on bass, and it was just amazing. Trying to follow those fingers of his, like what are we doing? There are two songs though that I really, really like off of Self-Titled. One of them is Animosity. Let's check out them performing Animosity back in the day.
Where you
again, I think the star of the self-titled album is again Matt Freeman. Matt Freeman is probably the star of every album, but I mean he really sticks out, especially with only one guitar in there. Which did they layer two guitars? I want to say they did for the recording. I mean, you always do. But. Amazing. Look at the energy they had back then. And man, they were cooking. They were on the rise. Shortly thereafter, they would release the second album, Let's Go, which was really the album that broke them, even though Out Come the Wolves is really like their big burst onto the scene. Let's Go is where they got all the major label attention that they would eventually rebuff. We'll tell that story on another stream. That's going to be a fun stream. Rancid and their flirtation with major labels will be a stream topic probably in August, to be honest with you. Let's watch one more song. It's a song from self-titled, but not the version that's on self-titled. This is from the great Hellcat DVD.
Knock, knock, come in. You wanna fight?
If you had only heard this version, by the way, of Rats in the Hallway, that would have to blow your mind whenever you heard the album version after that.
I'll take you out here in a minute. Step in my flat, see what's in it. I live in the land of the welfare state. A flat used to be Section 8. Now it's a rat facet, cocaine rolling, and my whole world plays like a broken drum. Junkie, drunken love. Yeah, rats in the hallway again. Outside my gate, my crew's drinking a 40. Asked me if there was still rats in the hallway. Some things aren't like the weather.
Given the Boot. It came out, I want to say late 2004, maybe early 2005. It was put out by Hellcat.
It don't seem to change here for the better. School came up to me, said she'd do me no harm. Rolled up her sleeve, she showed me tracks on her arm. What's your name, girl? She said it was Maya. She said, Tim, I wanna take you higher. Jogging.
Pretty freaking awesome. Shakira? Gray? I'm going to call you Gray. Sorry about that.
Down on his own when I'm around. Mr. High, Mr. Bunny, come Mr. Withdrawal. Pain is the only thing the kid will allow. The kid wants to dance, but the gangster knows how. Cause Johnny brought some shit down Civic and Market. Shoot up and boot up the human target. He hit the dirty spike when he hit this scene. It's easy to stay dirty, man, but nothing's clean. Cause he's a rider. Tagged a jackal now clamped on unclampable shackles. Boot up and shoot up some dope to go. It's like legal currency, it's like money to go. It's like that. Rat-tat-tat, kick out sharp point, blank in the back. Man, I said not to be bummed. He was a cocaine stoop and he had a...
Right here, and they do this little part here, it just shows the strength of Tim as a songwriter even back then, because I don't think it necessarily came through like the the original version, Rats in the Hallway. We're just kind of doing this, right? And then it's all deep and heartfelt. It's more like it's more like Hoover Street. The song sounds like. Which, by the way, Life Won't Wait's going to celebrate an anniversary here pretty quick. And I think the old Punk Ots is going to have to do a deep dive on Life Won't Wait. That's going to be fun. There's a lot of story around that album that doesn't get told that much.
He had it coming. He's only 12 years old. He's in the blizzard. He got shot for being cold. It don't seem right tonight. Hit the lights, alright. Watch the roaches run into the darkest room. Drunken bum. Rats in the hallway again. Drunken bum. Yeah. Rats in the hallway again.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how polarizing that album is, Archivist. I really am. So my initial run of Rancid, I was remembering this last weekend. I had self-titled first, and then right around the same time I had Out Come the Wolves, 93 self-titled, and Life Won't Wait. So I had a interesting mix of early Rancid for like the first couple of months, and I would listen to all four of them kind of every day. And I've really grown. I like Life Won't Wait, and this is what I'll say about it now. I view Life Won't Wait and 2000 as like two albums that are almost on a different plane. Like they just kind of don't belong. And they're like, not that they don't belong. That's a better way to put it. But they're almost like non-canon. And it's interesting because I think the new album, which we got a track listing up on the web the other day, the new album is probably more like 2000. That's definitely what I'm hearing on that new album. And so maybe we have another one that's in the continuation. Someone left a comment on my channel like, yeah, they've been trying to do Out Come the Wolves for 25 years. You know, it's about time they did a different album. I want to close this section though on the transition from Op Ivy to Rancid. I hope you guys have enjoyed it, found it insightful, or at least entertaining. I want to pull out something. I'm not going to play the song because the stream might get taken down. But let's look at the lyrics to a Tim Armstrong song from A Poet's Life. The often forgotten and I think underrated A Poet's Life. So earlier I played Journey to the End of the East Bay, which is partially about this whole situation, but more about the decline of Operation Ivy. Here is what we were talking about. Here's the whole story kind of put together in song form. So I'll go ahead and just kind of read the lyrics here. It starts out, among the dead we will rise. I woke up in a downtown street. We were crashed out, living in rubble. Broken bones, broken homes, broken kids living in the jungle. 1987 in the East Bay, cold as hell. 1987 in the East Bay, cold as hell. It's the middle of the summer. Me and Jesse and Matt and Dave Mello, he was the drummer. Mama said you better watch your back, boy. Keep your head up and be a shot blocker. On the outside looking in with the freaks and the thugs and all the punk rockers. So I'm out of step in this world, so step back, man. I ain't gonna warn you. Here's a message for the disenfranchised. East Bay, California. Let me tell you something about the East Bay. It's California, but it ain't sunny. All my dreams came crashing down. I'm out of my home, my street, got no money. Got no band, got no one around, all the music is gone, man. Nowhere to sleep, on the graft. Wondering what the fuck went wrong now. I know what it's like to walk among the dead. I'm alone in total isolation. No one's there. Is this my final destination? Old man preaching about war and peace and the path to total damnation. And I always seem to get up and get out and survive in every situation. And the third verse here. And then one day, Matt says, let's get a band together. Let's do it one more time, son. Okay, that sounds good. Let's give it a try. Let's give it one more run. They got no rides. We got drums. We got guitars. We got the songs. We got the songs. We got the songs. We got the songs all night long. So you could have spent 2 hours with me, you know, participating in this video, commenting, or you could just listen to that song. And that kind of sums up each and everything that we were talking about there. Go check out Tim's A Poet's Life album. Super underrated. Just kind of exists though on its own little private plane there. All right, guys, that was the Rancid to Operation Ivy, or should I say the other way around, pipeline. That was a fun little journey to go on, fun little research to do. It's one of the great stories of just all the twists and turns, and as I mentioned, there's just a lot more to it than that. I'm not out of here just yet because I don't have the heart out, but if we kind of got nothing going on, I might peace out. Next week. So next